Right. So you want to get the down low on how the AL West teams shook things up this offseason, right? We got some great analysis from baseballmusings.com. They break down each team's new additions and what it all might mean for the 2025 season.
It's more than just like a grocery list of names, though. We're talking strategy here. Like, what were these teams thinking? Did they make the right moves to reach their goals?
Some teams definitely went all in, while others seem to be playing it safe. Longer game. Ready for some surprises.
Let's get started.
Let's
Let's start with the Oakland A's. They made a handful of acquisitions, but the big question is, are they enough?
They picked up Gio Urshela for third base, Johnny Pereda at catcher, Luis Severino and Jeffrey Springs for the starting rotation, plus Jose Leclerc and Noah Murdoch for relief.
And only Noah Murdoch lacks MLB experience. He was a Rule 5 draft pick, so it seems like they're hoping for some immediate impact from, proven players.
But the analysis says their pitching improvements might be pretty small. They're projecting a jump from 4.5 to 5.1 WAR for their starting rotation. WAR, by the way, measures a player's overall contribution to their team compared to a replacement-level player.
Makes sense.
So 5.1 is decent, but not, amazing.
And a lot of those projections depend on Urshela bouncing back after, a tough 2024 season. He's a talented player, but that broken pelvis he suffered in 2023 is a concern. If he can get back to his, pre-injury form, that could be a huge win for the A's, especially considering their third baseman were hitting, backup catchers last year.
Ouch. Yeah, the article called it backup catcher territory.
Yeah.
And didn't hold back. If I'm an A's fan, I'm probably hoping to see some exciting prospects coming up from the farm system. This feels more like a let's see what happens approach.
Now let's talk about a team that made a much bolder move. The Houston Astros. Did they hit a home run or strikeout looking?
Hold on to your hats, because they brought in Isaac Paredes at third base, Christian Walker at first, Taylor Trammell for the outfield, and Hayden Wesneski to start. Sounds like a lot, right? But the real shocker is who they traded away.
Kyle Tucker. Trading away a player of his caliber is a massive decision, and in return, they got Paredes and Wesneski.
Paredes has got the power, but the analysis says he needs to work on hitting to all fields, not just pulling the ball. And Wesneski's going from a swingman role to potentially a full-time starter. Do you think he's ready for that kind of pressure?
It's definitely a gamble. The article pointed out that replacing Alex Bregman with a younger Paredes makes sense for the long term, but losing a player like Tucker is a steep price to pay. What do you think about this trade? Was it genius or a blunder?
Let's move on to the Los Angeles Angels. Did they go star crazy, or did they find some hidden gems?
Well, they definitely brought in some familiar faces. Jorge Soler at DH, Yohan Moncada at third, Tim Anderson at shortstop, Travis Arnaud behind the plate, J.D. Davis for first and third, Kevin Newman in the infield, Yusei Kikuchi and Kyle Hendricks for the rotation, Kenley Jansen closing games, and Garrett McDaniels for relief.
Wow, that's a lot of names. And the only one without MLB experience is McDaniels, who came over in the Rule 5 draft. Seems like they went all in on established players.
And that's what's interesting here. It's almost like they're banking on name recognition instead of young talent. The question is, will it work? Are they trying to buy time for their farm system to develop?
It's like they're saying, hey, look over here at these big names while we quietly work on the future over here.
Now let's switch gears and talk about a team that took a completely different approach. The Seattle Mariners.
Get this. They only added one player, Donovan Solano, a backup infielder. And they only signed him because he was already playing in Seattle.
They did pick up a minor league catcher named Julio E. Rodriguez as a free agent.
Wait, not the Julio Rodriguez, right?
Not the Julio Rodriguez. Can you imagine if they had both?
They'd have to create a new position. Super Julio.
Yeah.
But seriously, it seems like the Mariners are really confident in their current roster after just missing the wild card in 2024. The article even said they probably think they can make up the 2 games that kept them out of the playoffs last year. Do you think they're right?
Finally, let's talk about the Texas Rangers. Did they address all their issues, or are these just temporary fixes?
They definitely made some targeted moves.
Yeah.
Jock Peterson is their new DH heir. Jake Berger is at first base. Kyle Higashioka is catching. Chris Martin is closing games. And then they added a whole bunch of relief pitchers. Robert Garcia, Jacob Webb, Sean Armstrong, Hobie Milner, and Luke Jackson.
Remember how their bullpen struggled last season? They had the second highest walk rate and the 4th highest home run rate in the majors. They clearly went into this offseason knowing they needed to fix their pitching, and that's exactly what they did.
Trading away Nathaniel Lowe to make room for Garcia in the bullpen was a bold move, though. I mean, they addressed their DH situation with Pedersen and got a potential power hitter in Berger for first base. But will it be enough to overcome the loss of Lowe's?
The article mentioned that while Berger might not get on base as much as Lowe did, there's a chance his power numbers could actually improve now that he's out of Miami.
So another high-risk, high-reward situation. What I find interesting is that the Rangers seem to have had a clear plan. They identified their weaknesses and went out and got specific players to address those problems. Now the question is, will it work?
Yeah, it's fascinating to see how each team, approached this offseason with a different strategy.
Right. It's like they each had a different puzzle to solve.
Exactly, and that's what makes it so intriguing. The A's seem to be hoping for, incremental improvements. The Astros took a big swing. The Angels are banking on familiar names. The Mariners are standing pat. And the Rangers made some surgical strikes.
So looking at all of this, what stands out to you? Which team's strategy do you find the most intriguing?
It raises a really interesting question about the balance of power in the AL West. It's already such a competitive division, and these moves just add another layer of complexity.
Totally. I mean, remember 2024, the Astros were the favorites, but the Rangers ended up winning the division by just one game.
And the Mariners were right there, only 2 games back. It's anyone's game at this point, and that's what makes baseball so much fun. You can analyze all the stats and dissect every trade, but in the end, you just have to wait and see what happens on the field.
Speaking of seeing what happens on the field, I'm really curious to see how Isaac Paredes performs in Houston. He's got that raw power, but like we said, he needs to hit to all fields.
If he can make those adjustments, he could be a major force in that lineup. It'll be interesting to see how he handles the pressure of playing in a city with such high expectations.
And what about Hayden Wesneski? Do you think he's ready to make the jump to a full-time starting role?
He's definitely shown flashes of brilliance in his swingman role. If he can maintain that over a full season, he could be a real difference maker for the Astros. But consistency will be key.
We can't forget about Gio Urshela with the A's. He's coming off a tough year. But if he can stay healthy and regain his form, he could be a steal for them.
Absolutely. And keep an eye on Taylor Trammell in Houston. He's a bit of an all-or-nothing hitter, but if he can make more consistent contact, he has the potential to be a real offensive threat.
And what about the Angels' strategy of bringing in a bunch of veterans? Do you think they have enough left in the tank to make a real push?
It's a bold move, that's for sure. It's almost like a reunion tour of former All-Stars. But they're all getting up there in age. The question is, are they trying to win now, or are they just buying time for their prospects to develop?
It'll be interesting to see how that team dynamic plays out. You've got these established veterans who are used to being the stars, and then you have these young, hungry players who are trying to prove themselves.
And don't overlook the Mariners' decision to stay relatively quiet this offseason. They're putting a lot of faith in their young core, but do they have enough pitching to compete in this division?
That's a good point. Their offense is definitely potent, but they need their pitching to step up if they want to make a serious run.
All right, let's shift gears for a minute and talk about something that's been on my mind throughout this whole deep dive, the future of the AL West.
I like where you're going with this.
Yeah.
It feels like we're on the verge of a new era in this division.
We've got young stars like Julio Rodriguez and Adolis Garcia who are already making a huge impact, and then you have all these new additions who could potentially shake things up even further.
And don't forget about all the prospects who are on the verge of breaking through the ladder. The AL West is a hotbed of young talent, and it's only going to get more competitive.
It's going to be a battle for supremacy, and I can't wait to see how it all unfolds.
Okay, let's zero in on the Texas Rangers for a minute. They made some strategic moves this offseason, but will it be enough to push them over the top?
On paper, it looks like they addressed some key weaknesses. They brought in a proven DH in Jock Pederson, a potential power hitter in Jake Berger, and they completely overhauled their bullpen.
But it's one thing to make moves on paper. It's another thing to see those moves translate into wins on the field.
Exactly. Chemistry and execution are just as important as talent, and a little bit of luck never hurts either.
Let's break down some of their moves in detail. Bringing in Jock Pederson seems like a no-brainer. He's a proven commodity at DH, and he should provide a big boost to their offense.
Absolutely. He's a consistent power threat, and he'll add some much-needed experience to their lineup.
I'm also intrigued by Jake Berger. He has a lot of potential, but he's coming off a down year. Do you think he can bounce back in Texas?
It'll be interesting to see how he adjusts to a new environment. If he can find his groove, he could be a real asset for the Rangers, but consistency will be key.
And then there's the bullpen. They brought in a ton of new arms, including Chris Martin as their closer. Do you think they've finally solved their pitching woes?
It's definitely a step in the right direction. They've added a lot of depth and experience to their bullpen, and they should be much improved in that area. But time will tell if it's enough.
It seems like the Rangers identified their weaknesses and made a conscious effort to address them. Now it's up to the players to deliver.
It's a calculated gamble, and it'll be fascinating to see if it pays off.
It's interesting to see how these AL West teams are approaching team building in such different ways. It's like they're all reading from different playbooks.
It really highlights the different philosophies in baseball right now. Some teams are all about winning now, while others are focused on building for the future.
The Astros, for example, seem to be firmly in win-now mode. They're willing to trade away future assets for a chance to win another World Series.
That trade for Paredes and Wesneski was a big risk, but it shows just how much they want to win right now.
Then you have the Angels, who seem to be trying to bridge the gap between their aging stars and their promising young players.
It's a tricky balancing act. They're hoping those veterans can keep them competitive while their prospects develop into impact players.
It's a high-stakes game for sure, but if it works, it could be a pretty clever strategy.
And then there are the Mariners, who are taking a much more patient approach. They're trusting their farm system and getting on their young core to continue improving.
It's a long-term vision, but if those young players live up to their potential land-ins, the Mariners could be a force to be reckoned with for years to come.
And it's a testament to the faith they have in their scouting and development system. They clearly believe they have the pieces in place to build a sustainable winner.
The Rangers are in an interesting spot, too. They made some significant moves, but they also managed to hold on to a lot of their young talent.
It seems like they're trying to find that sweet spot between competing now and building for the future. It's a delicate balance, but they seem to be doing a good job of it so far.
Okay, I have one last question for you. Of all the moves we've talked about today, which one do you think will have the biggest impact on the AL West in 2025?
That's a tough one. But I think I have to go with the Astros trade for Paredes and Wesneski.
Really? You think that move could be a game changer?
I think it has that potential. Paredes has the raw power to be an elite run producer, and if Wesneski can handle a full-time starting role, they could have a truly dominant 1-2 punch.
But as we've discussed, there's always a risk involved. Both players have to live up to their potential for that trade to really pay off.
Exactly. It's a gamble, but the Astros have a history of making these kinds of moves work for them.
So what does all of this mean for you as an AL West fan? We've seen 5 different teams take 5 very different approaches to this offseason.
Yeah.
Some played it safe, some went all in, some are looking to the future, some are trying to win right now.
The AL West is always a wild ride, and this year is shaping up to be no different. Here's something to think about as we wrap up. Which of these moves do you think will have the most lasting impact on the division? Let us know what you think.